Today, I had the opportunity to talk with Patty Maas, who is a professor at the MIT Media Lab and head of the Fluid Interfaces group, where fluid here is an adjective rather than a noun, describing the seamless integration that her cognitively enhancing devices focuses on. She's realized long ago that with humans having cell phones on them 24/7, we've effectively already become cyborgs, just really, really inefficient ones. She aims to fix this. She uses EEG, EOG, heart rate sensors, and other biomonitors to provide input to AI and traditional algorithms, which can then give feedback to a user in the form of images displayed on mixed reality goggles, haptic feedback, or other electronic output, which can be used to improve people's day-to-day lives. She's an exceptionally busy person with literally dozens of projects going on, and we only had 30 minutes to talk to her today, although it easily could have taken up 5 hours of her time. We didn't get to go over nearly half of her projects, so I'll provide a link in the description below where you can find more about her work if you're interested. I hope to have a second discussion with Patty in the near future to discuss more of these exciting ideas, but until then, I hope you enjoy the conversation. Thank you so much for, sparing some of your valuable time to talk with us today. One of the things I noticed when I was doing some research about you, Xapiens group is familiar with some of your work, but you really have a huge body of work spanning over the past 30 years. Mm-hmm. That's honestly difficult a little bit for me to summarize. Would you be able to give a 30-second description of what you're working on?
Well, I studied AI as a student, but as soon as I graduated with my PhD, I sort of came to the realization that I was much more interested in helping people with being smarter, more capable, and so on, rather than building smart systems, basically AI systems. So all of my work has been about how can we help people with better decision making, with learning more efficiently, with better memory, with motivation, with attention, with grit, with creativity, all of those basically. Yep.
Yeah. I personally counted at least 12 projects that you've been involved on in the past even 10 years or so. And I've seen you mention before that you have basically more ideas than you have students that can work on them. How do you decide, which projects to devote manpower to?
Yeah. Well, basically, I very much believe in giving students some ownership over the projects that they work on. So rather than sort of when a student comes in telling them you're going to work on this project or that project, I present them with a range of opportunities and try to find something that they get really excited about and that they really feel like connects to them personally in some way. Sometimes we start from their idea actually and transform that. So I think people just work harder and are a lot more motivated if it feels like it's their idea also that they're working on and not just me assigning something to them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So just to name a few, and there's Alter Ego, Essence, which is a scent-based device, Psychic VR, Project Us. If it's okay with you, I can post some things online linking to your projects. Is there anything that stands out to you as kind of your favorite project or most inspiring?
Well, it's really hard to pick one because then I would pick one student's work over that of the other ones. So I think all of them have a great potential, actually. And again, all of them are sort of motivated also by what the students themselves are interested in, whether they're more interested in helping people with effective communication, whether they want to help people who may have certain disabilities, for example, with helping people like that communicate more effectively. So I think it's hard to compare them or to pick a favorite. Yeah. But I think in all of the work we try to innovate both in terms of the methods that we use, but then also work on something that potentially would make a big difference in people's lives. And that could be a smaller difference in a lot of people's lives for a large target user group, or a big difference for a smaller group of target users, like helping people that have MS or ALS with being able to express themselves still and communicate, for example.
Sure. Yeah, kind of an area under the curve sort of thing. On the topic of kind of making some innovations along with the projects you're working on, is there any sort of technology that doesn't currently exist. So as a precursor, a lot of your devices, integrate AI, hardware, various software algorithms to produce something that isn't necessarily, the next generation of general relativity, but it's kind of combining existing technologies in a very intelligent and unique way. Is there some technology that's currently missing that if it existed, you would be able to make, some great device?
Yeah. I don't think that there's a specific sort of thing that we're waiting for. But as you said, what makes the Media Lab in general, actually, not just my work, but the Media Lab in general unique is that we bring together a lot of disciplines, actually, and a lot of technologies. And these days, universities are very compartmentalized and people are an expert in a very small area. And I think what is unique here, and it's a little bit our secret sauce or or something, is that we integrate a lot of new ideas and recent ideas from different disciplines. In my case, that can be things like neuroscience and AI and human-computer interaction and electrical engineering and so design. And yeah, that's really, I think, the way we innovate is by bringing things together and also having teams that actually are very interdisciplinary. So I have students from a variety of backgrounds. I have philosophers in the group, electrical engineers, AI people, designers, neuroscientists, a little bit of everything.
So you've been at Media Lab for 27 years or so, something
30,
like this. It's not exact. Okay. 30. All right. No one's counting. Yeah. But I know that you started out actually in a software agents group that you were running. And nowadays you're running the fluid interfaces group, which by my description would be more focused on kind of building physical devices that help humans rather than just software. So what led to the transition from pure software into actual hardware devices?
Well, it was a bunch of things, really. One was the realization that if we work on wearable devices or immersive devices of some sort, like AR and so on, that we can be present or we can help people all day long, sort of, and not just when they're sitting in front of their computer. So that was a big reason, actually, to really meet people and help them in their daily life, wherever they are. It was also the realization that people were starting to carry cell phones and have them with them all the time and so on. So we realized, well, we're cyborgs. All of us are now carrying phones, and we never want to be without them. And it would be a disaster if that phone would be taken away. I mean, you can get a new one, but imagine you couldn't get a new one with the same data. That would be a big problem, because this is part of your brain now. And this is what helps you perform and get through the day and so on. So that realization that people now will always have digital technology on them, and we can go further in that direction and think about how these systems can integrate better with people's thinking, with their behavior, and so on. Because right now, of course, they're not at all integrated and they're very disruptive and so on. Yeah.
So this is something also we wanted to ask you about, which is back in the 90s or so, you did have some hardware devices that were already in existence. And I think you might have made some comments such as, if only these devices were a little bit more wearable, and maybe I can post online what they used to look like. They were, quite cumbersome. By my estimation, a lot of your devices look really great and really useful. They haven't really seen widespread adoption. Even, commercial products like Google Glass and HoloLens from Microsoft. Do you have any ideas what's preventing kind of a widespread uptake?
I mean, what I've learned by being here long enough is that it takes a very long time for new developments to ultimately make it in the marketplace, even though something could be technically realized and commercialized right away. An example of that is some work that we did in, it started in 83. We started work on recommendation systems that recommend information or products, music, films, and so on, based on what other people's interests are. So we started that work in 83 before web browsers existed. It was an email-based system that you could say like, hey, send me some more movies. Here's the ones that I like. Give me some recommendations. And a year later, we started a company around this, and we went to places like Blockbuster. You guys probably don't even know anymore what Blockbuster is, because in the meantime, they're out of business. But we would tell them, hey, look, we can personalize recommendations of movies for your customers and so on. And they were like, well, and that was by then there were browsers, or browsers were becoming a thing in e-commerce and so on. And they said, well, we're not sure this e-commerce thing is really gonna take off, and nobody's gonna want to give their credit card over the internet because somebody could steal it and do something with it and so on. And ultimately, we were 10 years too early with that company. We still made money selling the company to Microsoft, but we were just much too early. And it was years later that companies doing the exact same thing, basically recommendation engines for information, were doing very well. So yeah, it takes a long time, and that was even pure only software.
Right.
But if you also have hardware and so on, it takes a long time. Yeah.
So with the Firefly, the company, you had remarked that, the idea was, kind of a little bit ahead of its time. And I believe that, unfortunately, it was sold right before the .com bubble, where, it might have been a little bit more profitable. Is there the idea of something being too early? Did you know that at the time, or is it kind of only in hindsight that you can look back and be like... No,
it's only in hindsight. And now I know, well, because I've seen a couple of examples like that is just the way things go. That even though we thought the market should be ready for this, it wasn't at all ready, because they were dealing with even getting a website in the first place, sort of, and they're like, well, personalization, recommendations, no, that we're not ready for that. So yeah, it takes time, and now I understand that better. But we do have some other success stories from the lab. Like, actually, you may have read just a few weeks ago, Tulip is a spin-off from the group as well, doing basically augmented reality and integrating sensors into manufacturing warehouses. And they are almost a $1 billion company in terms of valuation now. So it's exciting to see real results like that and real impact.
I was looking through some of your projects relating to kind of augmented reality. So you have Possessed Hand, which is basically where some expert can kind of guide you into doing some sort of expert action, like molding clay. I was hopeful maybe it could be used for practicing free throws for basketball. And there's other augmenting devices you have which are related to maybe teaching someone a new language, helping them pay attention. Something that's really important to a number of people we know is it doesn't really feel right to have a device that can speak a language for you. There's some sense in which you want to be the one who can do it. How do you approach this problem of wanting to be the human instead of the device?
No, I think that's a very important question. And I teach a course actually on augmentation technologies at MIT as well. And that's one of the discussions that we have all the time. I think, I often quote Marshall McLuhan, who said, every extension is also an augmentation. If you adopt some technology that does something on your behalf, then you also lose something. You gain something, but you lose something. If you had a calculator tattooed on your arm so that you could always immediately do some computation whenever you need it, people would have a less good sense of numbers and arithmetic and so on, and they would lose something at the same time as gaining something. So I think it's very important to think about what kind of augmentation you ultimately want to sort of realize. And in some cases, it's okay to delegate something to a system or another person. It's just like people. Like, I'm okay with not knowing how to fix my car, and I'm happy just letting the mechanic do that. But in other cases, it's very important that the technology maybe teaches the person how to accomplish a certain skill, because it is a skill that is really important for doing well in life, and it's sort of a basis for maybe other types of functions and skills that they may have, or that they may want to develop. So it's very important to think, like, should the augmentation technology automate something on my behalf? Should it teach me how to do something and then it makes itself obsolete in a way? Or are we maybe helping a person who has lost a certain natural ability regain some ability by giving them an augmentation device, in the case of for example, people with MS or ALS still being able to speak or communicate with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this kind of relates to something else that I wanted to ask, which is you've mentioned in the past how, in the 80s and 90s, there were recommendation systems, there were expert systems, which was some early models of AI that eventually failed because basically people weren't listening to the end users on what would be useful to them and working closely with them. There's kind of the more broad question of, who should be driving this discussion of what augmented humans should look like. So could we get your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think it's very important that you involve the target users early on, that you don't sort of assume that you know what they need or what they want. At the same time, I think you don't want to go so far as to ask target users, what is it you need? Because they may not realize what the possibilities are, the technical possibilities. So it has to be this back and forth where I very much believe in sort of incremental approaches and iterative approaches, I should say, not incremental, iterative approaches to inventing new technology, where you create something. You invite feedback from target users and from other people as well, because other people may also be affected by the technology. Right. And then you iterate on the designs. And rather than thinking that you as the designer or the inventor know what it is that is needed, I think it's important to be humble and invite as much input as possible from everyone, especially from the target users.
Right. Yeah. There's a quote that's commonly attributed to Henry Ford of, if you asked people in 1904 what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Yeah.
But of course you don't want to, it's a fine line to walk.
Yeah.
It seems to be.
MIT is probably working on that as well.
Right.
Maybe we still need that.
Yeah. Well, actually, on the topic of kind of maybe augmented organisms besides humans, most of the projects that you've been working on are directed at humans.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, augmenting? It's maybe not so possible digitally, but it would be possible chemically, like with Kevin Esvelt's work, for example. Do you have any ideas in this sort of field of augmented organisms?
I haven't done a lot of work in that area, although I'm definitely very interested in how we can augment both people and nature in general, so that we can communicate better, actually, and understand each other better. So we've done a little bit of work on plants, for example, and engineering plants to send signals when they detect pollution, for example. So that was one student who was specifically interested in that area. Other people at the lab, not in my group, but have looked at ways of communicating with animals, because we can collect larger data sets now of sounds that they make and so on, and use powerful machine learning technologies to try to translate in some way maybe the noises or the signals that they give off. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe somewhat unrelatedly, I've seen you say that you're less intrinsically interested in technology and more interested in what it can be used for to help humans. And this is something that I personally relate to really strongly. I don't care so deeply about particle physics. I more care about what its uses are for, humans and the world in general. But if all of humanity's problems were solved, I would probably be playing basketball every day, something like this. So on kind of a personal level, do you have ideas on what you'd be doing if you weren't, driving the world the way you are?
Yeah, well, I think the job is fulfilling in two ways. On the one hand, we are trying to, help people with all sorts of things and make a difference in terms of how we use our devices and what role they play in our lives and so on. But I'm also, I get a lot of satisfaction from working with students and advising students and mentoring students and make sure that they are super successful when they graduate here. So I have to say that is actually another secret motivation that I have for this job. That it's just wonderful to have access to like the brightest, most creative people in the world, and then help guide them a little bit, sort of in certain directions. So,
Okay. So we've mentioned how just now you have really great students here at the Media Lab, and how in general the Media Lab is a nice interdisciplinary work area. Is there something that's limiting you? Are you limited on the funding side? Like, what's the bottleneck in your work, would you say?
Yeah, well, definitely, to be totally honest, with COVID and with the whole Epstein thing that happened, funding did go down.
Okay.
Yes. So we're still sort of rebuilding our reputation a little bit. And I mean, COVID also played a large role because the Media Lab is is so important in terms of a physical environment. It's very much, as you can see here, very open, and we do a lot of collaborations between people. It's not about people sitting in their little office and thinking hard about a problem and solving it or something. It's all about communication, collaboration, bringing people together, and that was very limited for the last 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Hopefully it's coming back, although it's not.
It is getting better, definitely.
But it's, as someone who's not affiliated with Media Lab, it's really kind of amazing to come into this space and you just get a sense of what's going on. It's a really kind of unique environment. That's
It is, and it plays a unique role at MIT, I think, because we are a place that does more integration and bringing disciplines together and really thinking about the society and the external world and implications of all these new possibilities for society and for people.
Sure.
Yeah.
So one question somewhat related to the diverse set of skills that's found at Media Lab. You were kind enough to come to a Xapiens symposium, what was now 2 years ago. And the board of panels was, the panel members was basically you, Max Tegmark, George Church, Ed Boyden, and David Sinclair. And that was really a great time. I forget who, someone had made a remark of, this is a diverse panel, and you had kind of responded, well, it's not quite diverse enough. So it would be great to get your thoughts on, what would, if you had to select, say 5 people or maybe 8 people, you don't have to name names, but what would that look like? Would you have that all be professors? Would they be old people, young people, male, female? Like what?
So I think MIT in general is very, of course, engineering and technology centric. And sometimes I feel that, for example, the humanities and so on are not represented enough in these important discussions about what future we want. Philosophers and historians and all these people have a lot to teach us, basically. And so that's one direction or one way in which that panel was not diverse enough. I think that it was all these people that were like so excited about technology and technology is great and so on. Another way was that it was on gender, very gender balanced. Half of the world is female or more. So why weren't there more women there? It wasn't very racially diverse or not at all racially diverse. We didn't have people from different economic or geographic backgrounds. A lot of the work there was very much about how rich, white, Western people can augment themselves to live longer, as opposed to like, how can we help people that don't have some of their basic needs met in other places? And I mean, I'm guilty of it as well, but I think that was definitely missing in that panel. Yeah,
it certainly seems like there's a lot of kind of low-hanging fruit, a lot of easier ways to improve the world. So something that I wanted to ask you about that's kind of in the maybe public domain a little bit more is, I'm sure you've heard of GPT-3 and the advanced language models that they have, which is basically just cram as many parameters, billions and billions of parameters into a huge system as good as possible and train it. Now they're coming with GPT-4. Do you think that this will ultimately be successful?
One of my current new students, for example, is playing with the model GPT-3 and looking at logical reasoning and so on, and where the limitations are. And it does break down, of course, at some point. So I think it's important that we are aware of the limitations of these approaches. We can get very far, but you're not going to get to some kind of general intelligence with that type of approach. Yeah, it's something that struck me when I was in my machine learning classes. It was really nailed into our heads of, these are really fancy math models. Don't get it confused that this is some perfect oracle. Right.
And, people place too much trust in it and then things fail.
On the other hand, you could argue that we people are maybe the same thing. They were under the illusion that we're so that we have general intelligence and so on, but maybe we're also just predictors based on data.
I mean, if I can ask you an esoteric question, some people maintain that we don't have free will and are basically just advanced computers. What do you think about this? Do you think we are free agents, or the consciousness is just an illusion?
Well, I believe, I think we have free will, but at the same time, I believe that we are machines. I mean, ultimately, I don't believe that there is some magical ingredient that somehow we won't be able to reproduce in machines.
So do you think it would be possible to kind of upload human consciousness, to be kind of cliche a little bit, into some software-only framework?
To be honest, I mean, it's not a question that sort of I think a lot about. I'm more practically minded, but in principle, it should be possible. But I think that entity would be very unhappy.
I mean, I certainly really value my human body. And a somewhat related question is, going back again to the Xapiens panel we had 2 years ago, there was a question from the audience of, given any of the great ideas that were talked about that day, which were, some of David Sinclair's work, your work, etc. Each panel member was asked to pick which technology they would like if they could have their pick of just one. And I believe your answer was aging without any sort of degradation would be great, which I completely agree with you on. But that's not directly what you work on. So there's the digital aspect of augmentation. There's biological, chemical methods, and I wonder why you don't work on the biological aspects of how you can improve aging.
Well, we do a teeny bit of biology related work, but my toolkit is the digital toolkit. I feel like I've already expanded by going from just software, which is what I was trained to work on, AI and computer science, to also including electrical engineering. And I'm not a biologist, so it's not my toolkit. But at the same time, I still feel that even though we're supposedly in the bio era now, and that's where all the big excitement is with Ginkgo Bioworks going public this week and so on. I still think that digital technologies are wonderful in that they are easy to make available at a low cost. The development is so much quicker, being able to do experiments and so on, as compared to experiments in biology. We definitely have it easy as sort of EE and CS people compared to the biologists. Right. I just think there's a lot more potential still in this area to do things. And
yeah. So again, in reviewing all of the work that you've kind of been on, it's really been inspiring to see, all the things that one human can be a part of. Mm-hmm. And we were curious what your mentors kind of looked like when you were, working on your younger career.
Mentors. I think great teachers, really. I basically came to MIT to work with two people, Rodney Brooks and Marvin Minsky. And so I would say those are definitely maybe two of my most important mentors. And I was attracted to their work because they dare to take risks, actually, and they dare to be different than everybody else. For a long time, Rodney Brooks was seen as the bad boy of AI, sort of. I think I learned from them to take risks and to also just have fun doing what you're doing, to not take it too seriously either, to just have a great time and be a great mentor as well, and care about the people that are working with you, because ultimately, that's the secret to the success is the great students, basically. Yeah.
So along those lines, is there any, I'm not sure if you want to, but is there any kind of mistakes or things that you wish you could have changed over your past, 30 years of working in the field? Anything you feel like you missed, something like this?
Whew. No, I think I've been very lucky to be to land in this place in the Media Lab, which I still think is one of the most exciting and unique laboratories in the world. So I've just been very lucky. I don't think it's necessarily my natural intelligence or my hard work. But yeah, lucky to be here and to work with great students.
Mm-hmm. So I know we're winding down on time, and there's something I really wanted to ask you, which is I've really been interested in some of your devices which help people basically become the person that they want to be. That's something that really resonates with me, and I think resonates with a lot of people of, there's some idea I have that I want to be, but man, getting out of bed every morning is tough. And once I get going, it's okay. For me, what seems to really be able to push me is if I just put on the right song. So basically music has some, maybe I'm working out or maybe I'm studying, and if it's quiet, okay, I'm tired, but I'll just get a song on and it somehow kind of, puts me in the right mindset. Yes. Do you have any kind of thoughts? Do you experience a similar thing? Do you think can be classified as some sort of augmentation?
Oh, totally. We've been looking in the last couple of years at sort of how certain modalities, other modalities can really help people, for example, motivating them and so on, or just making them feel better. And it turns out that, I feel like we've spent too much time thinking about the mind, sort of, and there's actually a lot of our body is equally important as our mind and our emotions and how we feel and so on. So we've actually been working, for example, on looking at music and what effect it has on you by, for example, looking at EEG while you play your playlists and seeing correlations in terms of, hey, you feel calmer if you listen to this music, or you seem to be more excited when you listen to this other music and so on. So I think we need to understand the bodily basis of cognition really better and explore some of these other pathways of helping people and influencing people that aren't about reasoning with people or aren't about the system telling you like be more focused or be more motivated or something. So I think that all of that has been has not been studied sufficiently in human-computer interaction, and there's enormous potential there. Even smells, well, like you said, music, colors, all sorts of other things, temperature, and so on. They all have an effect on how we feel and how or what things we are sort of good at in the moment. And we have been looking at all of that and looking at psychology studies, for example, to get inspiration. For example, we have like one device that just gives you a sensation of chills, because whenever you get that sensation of chills, you actually are a lot more alert, and your memory, you really remember what happened in that moment, like when you first learned that the Twin Towers were falling down, or something. That, I mean, it still gives me the chills now, actually thinking about it. But that's actually sort of again, a way that you can influence a person's mind by basically influencing or stimulating their body in some way. So our device gives you the feeling of chills at certain moments when you should be paying attention and when you should be like putting something in memory, basically. So these are some of the ideas that we are exploring with human studies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'd really love to have a follow up with you in some number of months and talk to you more about specifically the music you just mentioned and Frisian. And it's now we'll pack up, and we've used enough of your precious time, but we can't thank you enough. It's really been so amazing talking to you, and hopefully we can get to talk again in the future.
This is great. So I'm happy to talk again longer next time, or show you some of our devices and
that would be great.
You to the students.
That would be wonderful. So okay, well, thank you so much again. All right.
Thank you. Yeah.